We go now to the president's chief medical advisor, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Good morning to you, doctor.
Good morning, Margaret.
At this point, nearly 40% of Americans have gotten at least one dose of a vaccine. When will the infection rate come down?
You know, I think it's going to come down soon if we do two things. One that I'm sure we'll be able to do is to continue the really very fine rate of vaccination, where we're vaccinating between 3 and 4 million people per day. But the other wild card in this is to be making sure that until we get to that point, we don't pull back on public health measures, because we're having between 60 and 70,000 new infections per day. And it would really, I think, not be prudent at all to declare victory prematurely and pull back. Without a doubt, as we continue every single day to get more and more people vaccinated, that rate will go down if we don't give the virus the opportunity to essentially surge. And by giving the virus the opportunity, I mean just pulling back on public health measures. If we do those two things simultaneously, continue to vaccinate at the same time as we just hang in there a bit longer, well, I believe we will be okay. We will reach the point where we will be able to get back to doing things the way we did before. But we're going to have to make sure that we get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can.
But right now, about 5% of U.S. vaccine supply is sidelined because of this pause on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Can you explain here? I mean, what we have seen in public reporting is that it's 6 women between the ages of 18 to 45 who developed clots in their brain within 2 weeks of receiving the vaccine. Have there been any further cases, and will the restrictions be lifted this week?
Well, I don't know if there have been further cases, but we will know that by Friday. And I would be very surprised, Margaret, if we don't have a resumption in some form by Friday. A decision almost certainly will be made by Friday. I don't really anticipate that they're going to want to stretch it out a bit longer. And one way or the other, make a decision about J&J. I don't know what that's going to be, but, you know, thinking about what the possibilities are, one of the possibilities would be to bring them back, but to do it with some form of restriction or some form of warning. But I believe by Friday we're going to know the answer to that.
You told CBS this week that one of the things that you think needs to be investigated is the role of hormones here. Looking at the fact that these women are of childbearing age, you wanted to look at whether they were on birth control. Does that indicate that the restrictions could be gender-based?
Well, it could be, Margaret, but we have to be careful about that, because we now have only seen 6 people. Something that's similar, certainly in its mechanism and what we've seen with AZ, AstraZeneca, in the European Union and in the UK, has the same sort of thrombotic phenomenon, namely a clot, together with low platelets. That's a very unusual situation to see that. And yet, under those circumstances, where they've seen many more with that different vaccine, it has not only been restricted to women. And that's one of the points we want to be careful. So you don't want to jump ahead of yourself and decide you know the total spectrum of this, which is one of the reasons why they paused and why hopefully by Friday we'll know that.
So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, as I understand it, as a layperson, it's an inactivated cold virus injected into someone. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, these mRNA vaccines, are a very different kind of vaccine. When you were on this program in February, I asked you whether Johnson & Johnson was an inferior vaccine. You said, no, it is not. You can't say that. Do you still believe that?
Right. Yeah, from a standpoint of efficacy, no doubt we're dealing with 3 highly efficacious vaccines. The issue of safety now is being examined, and as we mentioned just a moment ago, we'll know a lot more about that by Friday. But the one thing we should emphasize when you're dealing with safety, people should not extrapolate a pause with one vaccine to the other vaccines. For example, the same surveillance system that picked up the 6 women in the J&J was the same surveillance system that the CDC and the FDA uses with the Moderna product and with the Pfizer product. And thus far, there have been no red flags of that, even though, tens and tens and tens of millions of people have been vaccinated with those vaccines. So one of the things you can take away from all of this is that when the surveillance system, the CDC and the FDA say that something is safe, you can be sure that it's safe.
The CDC director was on this program in February and said at that time that there were other vaccines being looked at, either to deal with different strains, as she put it, or booster vaccines. Do we know yet which one's needed, and when should Americans expect to have to go out and get a booster?
We're going to find that out soon, Margaret, because you determine whether a booster is needed to the particular virus that you're dealing with, like the standard virus. If you get a level of immunity, which is measured generally by antibodies, it's a correlate of immunity. When that level starts to fade down to a certain critical level, then it's a good indication you'll need a boost. Or if you start to see breakthrough infections, either with the original virus or with a variant. And if it's with the variant, even though a person's vaccinated, you might want to boost with a variant-specific boost, as opposed to just a boost to the regular. So we'll know sometime, I believe, by the end of the summer, by the beginning of the fall, likely by the end of the summer, whether or not we're going to have to boost people with an additional shot, be it an additional shot against the original virus, or perhaps a vaccination against something that's very specific to whatever variant you're worried about.
Dr. Fauci, thank you for your time this morning.
Good to be with you, Margaret. Thank you for having me.